Hi yogis, I'm Paula and this is a yin practice for the whole body, and we will be targeting a little bit more the upper body than we would normally, so the neck, the chest, the shoulders. And we're going to start today lying on our backs with our feet together in our reclined butterfly pose. So go ahead, bring the soles of the feet together and then lying down on the back, bring the shoulder blades underneath you. And you can either bring the hands to the belly, one hand on the belly, one hand on the heart, or if it's more comfortable, bringing them either side of the body. If this is a little bit too much sensation in the inner thighs, go ahead and grab your blocks or your cushions and just pop them underneath the knees. Just picking the height that suits you for that little bit of extra support so that you're not straining the inner thigh, the groin area here. So in our yin practice, we want to be looking for sensation, that first edge of a stretch. But we never want to push it. We never want to feel strain where it's uncomfortable and where it makes us tense up. So just taking a few grounding breaths here, settling into our space. And if it's comfortable, breathing in and out of the nose. And if the hands are on the body, on the torso, just feeling that connection between the breath and the hands. Noticing where you feel the breath more. And if you haven't already, feel free to close the eyes. I'm just going to be here for a couple of minutes. So we're going to try and target a lot of areas of the body today and just holding our poses for a couple of minutes at a time. In our yin practice, we can hold them for much longer than that. But 2 minutes is long enough to target the fascia, so open up the fascia whilst letting the body relax. And our poses today are working into this heart area, the chest, shoulders, which is associated with gratitude, kindness, and love. So maybe bring into mind an intention or a mantra that you've been working with. And it can be something as simple as I am grateful. And just taking a few more breaths here. And then taking the last inhale in this reclined butterfly, inhaling deeply. And then just sigh it gently out of parted lips. Okay, so from here, just support the legs, holding onto the outside of the thighs and drawing them back in towards the centre, bringing the feet flat on the ground. And from this position, we're going to come into a twist. So I'm going to keep this block over this side here, and you'll see why in just a second. So you might want to do the same either with a block or a cushion. So you can keep both legs slightly bent, and we're going to go ahead and draw the left knee in towards the chest and just give it a little squeeze here for a moment. Noticing any sensations as we compress through the front of the hip. And then if you feel like you've got a little bit of space available, you can start to straighten through that right leg. And we're going to bring the right hand to the left knee and just draw that left leg all the way across the body. And if we can, keeping both shoulders, so this left shoulder especially, in contact with the ground. And we're trying to encourage space between the left hip and the left shoulder. And the block you can see is here ready for me to rest my knee on. You can gaze up towards the ceiling, or you can gaze away over that left shoulder, keeping the neck nice and long. And you might be a little bit more open, again, having more space. Maybe that leg comes all the way down to the floor. You might even want to extend that leg out long. But remember, we're just working to that first edge of the stretch and letting the body open up gradually and slowly. No need to force. And this left arm can be out long, or maybe you choose to bend it at the elbow in more of a cactus position. And if the arm is lifted, if the shoulder is lifted, you could always put a blanket underneath the shoulder or the elbow, wherever you feel that you need that little bit of extra support. So really making this practice your own, using your props in whichever way feels best for you. And just taking about 5 more deep belly breaths here. And then on your next inhale, fill up all the way. And sigh that out gently. So supporting yourself out of this twist, holding onto that left leg, bringing it back to center. And then just briefly bringing the right knee in to meet the left, holding onto the right knee with the right hand, left knee, left hand. And taking any movements here that feel good. So maybe you're taking both knees round in the same direction. Or maybe taking them in opposite directions, really lubricating the hip joints here. Noticing any differences from one side to the other. And then pausing next time you come back to centre. Extending the left leg long this time. And keep a little bend in the knee if that's more comfortable. Holding onto this right knee and squeezing it in, compressing the front of the hip. And again, just pausing here for a few moments. And then from this position, we're going to come into our twist on the other side. So if you used a block underneath the knee on the first side, then you might want to get yourself set up ready on this side as well. So I've got one over here that will do just fine. So bringing the left hand to the right knee and gently guiding it all the way across the body. Encouraging this right hip to go down, lengthening that space between the hip and the right shoulder. And then finding your support on the other side. And just shuffling that right shoulder blade right underneath you so that the back can be as spacious as possible. And again, gazing up towards the ceiling with a nice straight, long neck, all turning away, gazing towards the right. And I've got a lot of sun coming through the window here, so my eyes are closed. You can go ahead and close your eyes too if that feels good. And really using the breath as a guide here. If you feel the breath is shallow and constricted, just coming out of that pose slightly, so propping another cushion or block underneath the knee, creating a bit more space in the abdomen to allow the breath to flow more easily. And just taking about 10 more steady breaths here. And then on your next breath, inhale deeply. And then gently sighing out. And again, supporting yourself out of this pose, so bringing that leg over with the help of the hands. And then bringing the left knee in to meet the right, taking those little circles again here, or any other movements that feel good. Maybe you just rock side to side here on the hips. Feel that little massage in the lower back and the lumbar area. And then we're going to transition onto our bellies to take a stretch through the front of the chest and the front of the shoulder. So, making your way there in your own time, so knowing there's no rush for these transitions. So coming down onto the belly. So you're going to keep your left arm underneath the shoulders, left hand under the shoulder, and then stretch the right hand out long. And then gazing down towards the mat, keep the neck or the chin tucked in, and then just turn towards the left here. Now this might feel like enough of a stretch already into the front of that right shoulder. For a little bit more, we're just going to gently push with these left fingertips and roll any amount towards the straightened arm. So that might mean that your legs stay stacked on top of each other, maybe even bending one knee or both here for a little bit of extra support. Or if the shoulder feels quite open, you could always take that top leg, so your left leg, all the way over for a little bit of an extra hip stretch here. But just finding that place where you can relax into the stretch without any discomfort. Being really mindful of the shoulders. A delicate joint, the joint that's the most easily injured. So we really do just want to go to this very first edge of our stretch. And then once we find it, staying there, if we can, in stillness. But equally knowing that at any time you're free to change position, find a different version of the pose. And again, we're just here for 10 more breaths. Letting that right shoulder blade sink down away from the ear. So we're always creating space between the shoulder and the ear. And then coming into our last breath here. So on your next inhale, filling the lungs all the way up in all directions. And then gently drawing the belly button in as we sigh out. And coming out of this pose nice and slowly. So if the foot's behind you, bringing the legs back together first. And slowly rolling towards the left hand. And then back onto the belly. And then just briefly make a little pillow with the hands here. And rest the forehead down. Or maybe rest the side of the forehead. Whatever feels best on the neck. And just take a few breaths here before we take that on the other side. Noticing any sensations in the body, any tingling, pulsing, any heat. And just really becoming aware of all the things that we can feel in our physical body. Okay, well, let's take that on the other side. So this time, stretching the left arm out long. And bringing the right fingertips underneath the right shoulder. And again, this might be enough. Or if you want a little bit more, just turn in towards the right here, making sure the shoulder blade's down, creating space between the left shoulder, left ear. Back of the neck is long, maybe bending the knees, or maybe taking that right leg all the way over. And being aware that one side might be very different to the other, so especially if you do a lot of writing, computer work, driving, and you might find that one shoulder is a lot tighter than the other. So just taking each side for what it is without any judgment, any expectations. And again, just taking about 10 more breaths here. And then when you're ready, inhaling. And sighing out. And to come out with a pose, bring that leg back first. Maybe noticing any sensations in the hip as you bring it back. And then rolling on to the belly. And again, making that little pillow with the hands. Just pausing here briefly. Finding length through the back of the neck. And just taking this moment to notice any sensations in the physical body. Also any thoughts, feelings, emotions that might have arisen. Or anything that might have shifted. So we're going to slowly transition up to a tabletop position. So bringing the hands under the shoulders, pressing your torso up. And we're just coming into our swan pose. So from here, we're going to bring the right knee forwards so that the right knee comes towards the right wrist and the right ankle comes towards the left hip. And this position might be different or will be different for each of us. So maybe the thigh comes out at more of an angle. Maybe your shin comes straighter with the front of the mat here. But finding that position where there's no pain in the knee, so no twinging in the knee. And you can find a stretch in through the hips. Maybe you pop a block or a cushion or a blanket underneath this right hip for a little bit of extra support. So we want to try and keep the hip bones level here, so we don't want to be sinking into one hip or the other. And if we can, keep them square towards the front of the mat. So staying upright in our swan, feeling that sensation through maybe the front of the left hip as well as the outside of the right hip. Relaxing the shoulders down, away from the ears, gazing down towards the mat. And just asking yourself here, where can I let go? Where can I do a little bit less? Which muscles don't need to be working quite so hard? coming into our last breath here. So we're inhaling and sighing it out. So from here, we're going to transition, moving this block out of the way by just sitting onto this right hip. And you're going to swing yourself around so that your right foot comes into the left thigh. And I'm going to turn myself around so you can see me. So you're going to end up with your right foot in the inside of your left thigh. So you might want to sit on a block or a blanket here just to raise the hips and create a little bit of space in the low back. So by doing that, we allow the pelvis to tilt forwards. And this natural curve in the lower back to come back. So sitting nice and tall, just pausing here for a moment. Reaching tall through the crown of the head on that inhale. Maybe you choose to stay here. If you want to take a twist here and a forward fold, you're going to inhale and lift even taller through the crown of the head. And as we exhale, turn in the shoulders towards this straight leg. And again, just pausing here for a beat. And then on an exhale, you could start to fold forward just any amount. So walking the fingertips forward, keep the back nice and long, reaching through the crown of the head. And then when you can't go any further, then you can start to round through the spine if that feels good. And if you wanted a little bit of support here, you could pop a bolster, a blanket, even a block, but make sure you're not placing anything on the knee here. And then just resting the head down for a really supported version of our single leg straddle. So quite a lot going on in this pose. So just taking a little scan all the way from the crown of the head down through the muscles in the face, relaxing anything that you can, and carry on scanning down through the shoulders, releasing any tension that might be there, softening, creating space between the shoulders and the ears. Scanning down through the torso, the back, the low back and the hips. And then finally all the way through the legs and even the feet. Gently encouraging the body to relax. And then as you're ready, taking your last breath in here, inhaling deeply. And sighing it out. And coming out of this pose slowly, using the hands to support the torso upright, moving any props out of the way, and just taking a moment, moving out of it just as slowly as we came into it. And then bending that straight leg, maybe bringing the hand under the knee to draw it in. It might feel good here to take the feet out wide, leaning back on the hands, and just taking some little windscreen wipers. Noticing any sensations through the hips here. And then when you're ready, making your way back to tabletop. And we're going to take our swan pose on the other side. So if you had a block or a cushion underneath your hip on the first side, then have that ready here. So from our tabletop, this time we're going to bring the left knee forwards towards the left wrist and the left ankle towards the right hip. And again, adjusting that leg in whatever way feels right for you. So just taking a moment here, even squaring off the hips before you start to lower down. And then setting up your props wherever you need them. And again, remembering one side might be very different to the other, and that's completely normal and completely okay. And as we hold this pose, again, just looking for any areas of tension. And just seeing where we can relax into the pose and be supported by the ground underneath us. And then when you're ready, taking the last breath in here. And sighing out. So we're going to transition again into our half straddle pose. So moving the block out of the way, if you're sitting on one, or cushion, or whatever you've got. And then sliding onto that left hip to come into our seat. So again, if you want to sit on a block or cushion here to raise the hips up, then go ahead and bring that back in. And this leg doesn't have to be out super wide, so just find the position here that feels good for you. Pause in a moment here. Using the breath to find length through the spine. And then inhale again as we reach up tall. And on an exhale, turning the shoulders towards that straight leg, just as much as feels comfortable. Just noticing how that changes the stretch here. And then maybe you stay here, or maybe you start to fold forward, so keeping all that length in the spine that we've just created. Reaching through the crown of the head until we can go no further. And keeping the sits bones rooted. And then finding that place where you can relax. Maybe even turning the palms up towards the ceiling. Or bring in something underneath the forehead here. You could even use the arms to make a little pillow. But again, just being careful with that knee. We don't want to place any pressure on the kneecap. And then coming into our last breath here. Sighing it out gently. And using the hands to support the weight of the torso. Coming all the way back up, stacking the shoulders above the hips. Taking a moment. Okay, and then when you're ready, holding on behind that straight leg, bringing the knees back in, and again, taking some of these windscreen wipers if that feels good. Noticing all these little pulses, any throbbing sensations of heat. Knowing that with all these movements you're making your joints and your body stronger, healthier. Okay, so we're going to come onto a kneeling position. And if you have a block, then have that handy here. So you've got the option here of bringing the block in between the shins and bring the knees together and then sit down on the block. So that just raises the hips up a little bit higher. And then sitting tall, so again we've got length through the spine. And the feet are tucked in here, so we're not quite sitting on the feet, but the shins and the ankles are in one straight line, so the ankles aren't sickling in any funny directions here. And of course, if you're okay without the block, you can always just sit in between the feet, so maybe taking the feet out a little bit wider, but again, keeping the ankles nice and straight for a slightly deeper stretch into the quads. So wherever you are, sit nice and tall in our saddle pose. Stack the shoulders above the hips, draw the chin in slightly. And then from here, I'm going to offer you a stretch through the neck. So you're going to take the hands behind you, bring the collarbones nice and broad, and just let the shoulders rotate. So they're not rounding forwards, you're just slightly rotating here. And as you do that, bring the hands behind you and interlink the fingers. And again, broaden through the collarbones, slide the shoulder blades down the back. And then maybe you stay here. Or if you want to, you can just let that left ear gently tip towards the left shoulder. And as you do that, just be mindful that you're not creating any tension, you're not hunching. So it's a very subtle movement. And we're just going to take 5 or 6 breaths on each side here. So as that ear is towards the left shoulder, we're feeling sensation down through the right side of the neck, maybe even into the front of the shoulder, top of the shoulder. Slightly dipping the chin towards the chest. And then making your way back to centre. Broadening again once more through the collarbones. Just checking with those shoulders that they're rolling back and down, shoulder blades down the back. So the hands are drawing down towards the floor. And reach tall through the crown of the head, so the chin's drawn in slightly. And then take the right ear towards the right shoulder. And just any amount, it might be a very small movement for you to feel this. So staying with the breath, you might be feeling some quite strong sensations, maybe in the lower body as well. Just keeping the breath nice and steady. One more breath here. And then inhaling the head back towards centre. Release the fingertips to the ground. And then bring the fingers in front of you. And just lift the hips to come on out of that saddle. Ooh. So maybe take a moment here just to move the hips from side to side. And we're going to come down into our child's pose. So bringing the knees out as wide as feels good for you. So the wider the knees, the deeper we'll get into the hips. And bring the big toes to touch. And go ahead and sink the hips down towards the heels. Reach out through the low back, so find some length through the spine here, and then walk the fingertips forwards. So you might find that here you want to place a blanket in between the back of the thighs and the calves. And that will just lift the knees up slightly, so it's a little bit more gentle on the knees. You can even put a block underneath the forehead, so loads and loads of options here for our child's pose. Find a place that feels good for you. We're only here for about a minute. So seeing if you can physically let go here and just allow yourself to be completely supported by the ground. And then coming into our last breath, inhaling all the way into the low back. And exhale. And then from here, we're just going to transition slowly into our peppy pose, our heart melting pose. So bringing the knees above the hips. Maybe shuffling them back towards the back of the mat a little bit. And then taking the hands out wider than the shoulders, so as wide as your yoga mat, if you're on a yoga mat. And then keeping the hips above the knees, and draw that low belly in, and just let the heart start to melt towards the floor. So the shoulders are relaxed, collarbones broad. And there's the option here to place the head on a block. You can even have a bolster underneath you to make it more supported. Really trying to focus this extension through the upper back. So there shouldn't be any real sensation in the low back at all here. And just a few more breaths here. And taking a big inhale when you're ready. And sighing out. And from our puppy pose, we're going to kind of shuffle forwards as elegantly as we can onto our bellies, coming into our Sphinx pose. So setting up with the shoulders above the elbows. Or if you want a slightly less sensation, just walking the elbows forwards a little bit. And that will just take out some of the back bend. And again here, we don't want to feel sensation in the low back, we're targeting the upper back. So pressing the tops of the feet gently into the mat and pressing the hips gently down too. And again, let the heart space just melt forwards. Collarbones broad, gently dipping the chin. It might feel better for you to turn the palms up here. Maybe playing with bringing the elbows in slightly. Again, that will depend on your anatomy, what feels good for you. And softening just a little bit more into our last few breaths here. And taking a breath in and sighing out. And just make a little pillow with the hands, just like we did earlier. And this time you're going to slide the left knee up and out to the side, coming into kind of a half frog pose, so that the shin is parallel with the edge of the mat, the long edge of your mat, and the ankle is flexed. So we're making 90-degree angles. The knee doesn't need to come as high as the hip. I find this is a nice counter pose, just allowing the low back to settle. And feel a nice opening through the front of the hip. Just letting the upper body completely relax here. And just stay for a couple more breaths. And go ahead and straighten that right leg. And let's take that on the other side. So just sliding the left leg out and up towards the hip. And then when you're ready, straightening that leg out again. And then we're just going to roll onto our backs. So I'm going to press myself up and come onto the other edge of my mat. But you can just roll yourselves onto your back wherever you are. So, bending the knees here. Bring the shoulder blades underneath you. Create a little bit of space so the shoulders can just melt down into the mat. Collarbones nice and broad. Picking up the head and lengthen through the back of the neck. And then from here, just pick up one knee and then the other. And then just take some of these little circles again. So just releasing any last little bits of tension before we come down into our final relaxation pose. Maybe taking the knees in opposite directions. So we've worked quite a lot into the hips, as well as working through the shoulders, chest and the neck. So for our relaxation, I'm going to offer you a legs up the wall pose. So if you've got a wall nearby, go ahead and shuffle up to the wall and then bring the legs up. You can do this without a wall as well. So if you've got a bolster or even a block here, you can bring it underneath the hips just for that little bit of support. A rolled up blanket or even a rolled up yoga mat works well here too. So just something that stops the hips from rolling back down. And it's literally just underneath the hips, so we don't want to lift them up too high here. And if legs up the wall doesn't feel right for you, you can just take your regular Shavasana with the legs stretched out long. But we're just going to be here for a few minutes. So finding that place that feels right for you. And then bringing the attention again back to the breath. Feeling the breath coming in through the nose. And fill all the way up through all four sides of the rib cage. And sigh out of the mouth. And just let the arms be heavy. Let the feet roll away from the body. And know that for these next few minutes you don't need to do anything. And you don't need to be anywhere. Just enjoy these next few minutes of silence. And again, just become aware of the breath in the body. Become aware of any sensations, pulsing, tingling. And feel the whole body breathing itself. And starting to deepen the breath. And as you do with each inhale, feel the energy flowing around the body to every living cell. And maybe finding some movements here in the fingers and the toes. And when you're then slowly rolling onto one side. And then we're just going to pause here for a moment, knowing that there's no rush. And reminding ourselves of our intention or our mantra at the start of our practice. I am grateful, or any other intention that you had for yourself. And then slowly pushing your way up to any comfortable seat. And when you arrive, rolling the shoulders back, stacking them above the hips. Bringing the hands to that heart center where we've created so much space.